Hey guys, welcome back to Analyzing Horror. My name's Lauren, and in this episode of my original versus remake series, we're going to be talking about the toxic viral horror, the Crazies. So after a strange plane crashes in a small town's water supply, a toxic virus begins to turn the town's residents into violent psychopaths. A young couple, David and Judy, at first are quarantined and then end up having to fight for survival alongside other unaffected townspeople. So fair warning, I'm going to be talking about the storyline and some spoilers for both of these movies, so if you haven't seen them yet, make sure to pause, go watch the movies, and then come back afterwards. Alright, let's start off by talking about the 1973 original and what I liked about it. First off, I just wanted to clarify that I've actually seen the remake several times. I really like that movie, but this was the first time that I watched the George A. Romero original. And I thought it was really cool having context from the remake while watching the original for the first time. I also spotted a lot of Easter eggs, and I could also see where the remake pulled from the original in terms of storyline and plotline. And I just really loved how different the two movies were, but you could also see the connections between the two. So the way that this version introduced the virus situation was very quick, and immediately the military is in the small town and they start an instant aggressive quarantine, and it so quickly spins out of control and just gets worse and worse for the poor residents. I found that aspect so unsettling and nerve-wracking because they were being so forceful, but especially because they weren't communicating or explaining anything to the townspeople. Also, the way that they were rounding people up by literally barging into people's homes and dragging men, women, and children out of their own beds. They were basically treating them like cattle. It was so upsetting and stressful. There was even one point where a woman was resisting being pulled out of her own bed, and she yelled at a government official, "Just tell me what this is all about and maybe I'll cooperate with you." And I was just like, exactly. I hated that they weren't explaining or communicating in the slightest to the townspeople, and they were confused why they were resisting. The way that the military refused to communicate and also the way that they treated the townspeople made me physically uncomfortable, and I was so deeply distressed for the residents. I hated it. I don't blame them for resisting one bit. I definitely would have resisted too. Like, that whole situation sounds like a hellish nightmare. I also thought it was interesting that this version was largely from the government's perspective of the outbreak, way more than the remake, which definitely makes this more of a government quarantine movie rather than a virus infection movie. That being said though, I thought there were some really good crazy scenes, and I also really loved following David and Judy as they try to escape the quarantine. The crazy scenes that stood out to me the most was the older woman with a knitting needle stabbing a military official with a smile on her face, and also the scene where a horde of crazies take out a bunch of government officials, and after they pass, a woman with a broom just starts sweeping the grass and the dead people. Like, the crazies were so unsettling and added even more chaos to some scenes in a weird way because they were always so creepily calm and smiling the entire time. And then later on in the movie, Clank, who is David's friend and coworker that's also been traveling with him and Judy, starts to exhibit signs of what he calls the bug. It starts off small, but he begins to start acting a little bit psycho, and when that happened, I turned into that Leo DiCaprio meme. I was just like pointing at the screen like, "Oh my god, we saw you drink water earlier. I saw you drink water. You've got the bug." Which honestly made me a little bit sad because I liked Clank as a character. Okay, so in addition to Clank traveling with David and Judy, they also were traveling with a father and his teenage daughter. And along with Clank, they start to show signs that they also have the bug. And at one point in their manic state, the father forces himself on his own daughter. And because she's manic too, she resists at first, but then just gives in. Ugh. Ugh. It was a very short scene, but I just wanted to peel my own skin off. Like, that is easily the most disturbing scene in this entire movie. Like, I could just tell something awful was about to happen. And there's this really sick sense of dread as the movie built up to that scene. And it just made my skin absolutely crawl. And like I said, I just wanted to peel it off. Ugh. And I've said this before, but scenes like that are reasons why I believe that human beings often provide more horror to horror movies than any monster or poltergeist could. Our fellow men are truly capable of some really disturbing things. Lastly, this movie had such a bleak ending. I threw my hands up in the air whenever the doctor got trampled by that mob when he was trying to tell someone that he might have found a cure. That scene was so damn frustrating because a military official didn't recognize him, so he's trying to convince him like, "No, I'm a doctor. I think I might have found a cure." And then he tries to shove him in with the mob, and then the mob tramples him to death. Also, David and Judy's demise, as well as the movie ending on the ominous understanding that the virus can't be contained. Like, a lot of upsetting things happen in the last 20 minutes of this movie. And the ending just left me with a pit in my stomach. So in terms of dislikes, while I thought that the anti-government, government mistake aspect of this version was very interesting and thought-provoking, for me it felt like two different movies put together. And honestly, the movie kind of lost me a little bit in the second act. I also felt like the government aspect of this story slowed down the pacing a little bit. And again, while I found the government aspect of this version very interesting and thought-provoking, I was definitely more invested in the David-Judy side of the story. And any time we panned over to the government side, I found myself frustrated because they're so untrustworthy and they're handling the situation so poorly, and all I wanted was to get back to David and Judy. Although I have to assume it was at least partially intentional, so it was very effective, I have to give it that. Also, again, that bleak ending, damn. It was realistic and appropriate for the story, don't get me wrong, but that sheer lack of hope at the very end just made my heart sink. And again, I know this is the objective, it was very effective in that way, but it just was so dismal and just really left me feeling hollow at the very end. All right, let's move on to the 2010 remake and what I liked about it. First off, I really liked how the movie started, where the very first shot is the town burning, abandoned, and destroyed. It was very dark and ominous, and it immediately set the tone for the movie. I also really loved the cast. I am a huge fan of Timothy Olyphant. I love seeing him in horror movies, and he was really great as David. I loved his character. Also, I had to mention that he's really great in the Netflix show Santa Clarita Diet. It's a really fun and bingeable show, and his character is so funny and cute. Like, it's one of my favorite comfort shows, so I had to mention it. I also really liked Radha Mitchell as Judy. I really loved her in Silent Hill, and it's always nice seeing an actor return to the horror genre. I also really loved Joe Anderson as Russell. I really loved his character as well as his specific character storyline. I was actually introduced to him in Across the Universe. I really liked him in The Ruins, and then after The Crazies, he went on to do Horns. And again, I just really love when an actor returns to the horror genre, and I really like his nonverbal acting, and I just think he's a good actor. And overall, the entire cast just screams 2010, and I love it. I also really love how the virus situation unfolds in this version. Like how at first we get a small glimpse of the day in the life of all of these residents in the small town, and then that initial baseball scene where a local just charges onto the field with a shotgun, and David, who's the town sheriff, has to take him out in self-defense. That scene is so unsettling, and every time I watch it, my shoulders tense up because it's that contrast between like a sense of innocence with the baseball game and everyone's having fun, and then this crazed local is just coming onto the field with a shotgun, and all of a sudden everyone's just like, it also obviously feels so out of place at a baseball field. And yeah, it's just really unsettling, but it's also only the beginning, and it quickly ramps up from there. Also, I personally liked how limited the amount of time the government was involved in this version. They quickly came into the town, set up a quarantine, were outnumbered, and then basically evacuated. Also, all of the rounding up and segregation scenes were really stressful and terrifying, especially for Judy because she's pregnant and running a fever because of this, but she was mistaken to be sick, so she's forcibly ripped away from David and quarantined. Like, the chaos in that scene stresses me out so much. Also, the crazies in this version were so much more violent and disturbing. Holy hell. Like that first attack where a local locks his wife and toddler in a closet and then sets his house on fire. That scene was so disturbing. Also, that infamous pitchfork scene, oh my god. That scene scares the absolute hell out of me every time I watch this movie. Also, I forgot to mention this before, but there's also a pitchfork in the original, and I just thought it was really cool that it wasn't like a random weapon choice, but actually an Easter egg for the original. Another memorable scene for me was when they returned to David and Judy's house to gather supplies, and two crazies ambushed them. There's this one part in the scene where David is struggling with one of the crazies on the ground, and he goes to reach for his gun, and the other crazy stabs him in the hand. Oh my god! Hand body horror always makes me squirm in my seat. I have some body horror buttons, and that's definitely one of them. If anyone's curious, other buttons for me are the Achilles heel, eyeballs, nails, oh my god, eyelids, basically any sensitive part of your body, which is funny because your entire body is sensitive, but you know what I mean. But anyway, Russell, who's David's friend as well as his deputy, shoots the crazies just in time, but now he's displaying signs of being sick, and that always makes me so sad because I really like his character. He's basically the Clank in the remake. And oh my god, that car wash scene. So they managed to get a car at a certain point, and they have to duck into this car wash because a government helicopter spotted them, and now they're trapped because they can't leave because of the helicopter, but they got several crazies in that car wash with them. And just that concept of being trapped in a small space with several psychos is very, very unsettling to me. And then they start to attack the car, and it's so freaking scary. And then poor Becca, who is a teenage girl that's been traveling with them, gets caught by one of the crazies and then is forcibly hung. I remember being so shocked by this kill the first time that I watched this movie because it was so quick and sudden. And it's just another reminder about how evil and violent these people that are affected by the virus are. I also really liked this bittersweet scene where Russell accepts that he's sick and wants to sacrifice himself so that David and Judy can sneak around this government facility. Like I've already mentioned several times that I love Russell as a character, but I just loved him so much more when he was just like, if I'm gonna die, let it at least mean something. Let me help you. That's a good man and friend right there. Lastly, that whole scene where David and Judy have to fight off several crazies that are in this diner that they were hiding out in is so scary. That last scene is so stressful and tense because you're on the edge of your seat like, are David and Judy gonna make it? But I really love that they persevered, and the movie ends with a glimmer of hope where David, Judy, and their unborn child continue to survive in this new world. So I honestly can't really say that there's anything that I dislike about this movie. I honestly really love everything about it. It's a horror movie I find myself constantly revisiting. I think it's really well paced. I love all of the characters, and the crazies are so violent and menacing. So all in all, you can probably guess, but I prefer the remake over the original. Don't get me wrong, I love George A. Romero, but the government aspect of the original story really slowed down the pacing for me, and I just personally really loved how the remake restructured the story and focused more on David and Judy. And like I said, I love the cast in the remake, and the crazies were so much more terrifying and made for some super tense scenes. That being said though, I'm really glad I finally got around to watching the original and experiencing it. It made me appreciate the remake all the more, and I think that both are absolutely worth your time. So what do you think about these movies? Do you have a favorite over the other? Are they about even for you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Also, this is just a reminder that I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. So if you're interested in following me on those and you haven't already, the links are in my description box below. And as always, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so Black Phillip knows you'd like to live deliciously. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you again very soon in the next video. Bye!